What's up, YouTube? It is Ben with Bearded Spruce here having some coffee next to my latest DIY project. This beautiful built-in electric fireplace was non-existent in our house. We currently live in a really cool mid-century modern house, but it was missing one very cozy thing, and that was a fireplace. Unfortunately, after a ton of research, it was going to be pretty hard to find a place that we could put a flue pipe. We have beautiful tray ceilings that are original to the house and a very quirky layout, including what's behind here is actually our master closet. So we couldn't really do a traditional gas or wood burning fireplace without disturbing a major piece of our house. So after a lot of research and looking at other projects that people are doing, we found this awesome insert on Amazon. I'll link to all the products in affiliate links below if you guys want to check them out yourself. This fireplace in particular has amazing reviews, and I think the reviews are spot on. I love the aesthetic. It has a little remote control, I'll show it in a little bit, that you can turn on the visuals, which looks like this right here. There's two other settings to kind of adjust and fine tune what you kind of want it to look like that I'll go through later. And then it also has a heater built into it. So it not only looks cool, but it also cranks out a ton of heat, similar to a space heater, but built into this cozy fireplace aesthetic. All right, so let's go into a little bit of details on this project. So as you can see behind me, it's about 5 feet tall, 5 feet wide. The fireplace is about a foot off the ground, which is purely up to you. I'll go over, how I decided how to build it and the framing, all of that kind of stuff very soon. But the cool part is you get to pick and choose your finishes. You get to pick and choose what is on top of for the mantle. My wife did a great job decorating it for this shoot, and she was so excited to finally decorate a mantle after years of living without one. So without further ado, let's jump into this project, and then I'll wrap up at the end with some things I learned that you should try to avoid, and or just little tips and tricks that I found along the way. So as you can see behind me, I've actually already marked out where the fireplace is going to be with these little Sharpie marks. We're going to do a shiplap horizontally across, and then my wife will choose whatever paint color, probably black, if you know us at all. And we'll have horizontal shiplap, and then we'll just plug in the fireplace into the front of it. As you can see, I put a outlet right down here to plug the fireplace in, and then I also added a outlet on the top of it to plug in like a Sonos or potentially a TV in the future if someone wanted to mount a TV up here above it. But for the most part, we're going to keep it pretty simple. Horizontal shiplap, like I mentioned, and then we'll find a really cool piece of wood for the top mantle piece. So first things I need to do is kind of explain the layout. If you can see this piece of paper, I'll kind of come in close. This is the drawing I put together. So like I mentioned, it's going to be about 5 feet tall by 5 feet wide. And then the fireplace is going to be about a foot, 10 inches to 12 inches above the ground. And then I'll kind of build a structure, a box to kind of set this in. It's a super shallow fireplace, which is really nice because we didn't want to take up a ton of room like a traditional fireplace. It's more of just kind of an accent piece for hanging stockings at Christmas or decorating throughout the year, and just kind of adding some warmth and texture to the room. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build the frame, and then I'll bring you guys back to kind of see how I built it and how the fireplace is going to fit into it. and then we'll move on from there. Got the framing completed, and I'm gonna try to walk through kind of how I made some decisions so it'll be easy for you guys. Here is it with the fireplace in, obviously. You can see that around the fireplace I made a piece of wood for it to sit on the bottom, a piece of wood for the frame to kind of lean against on top, and then two side pieces that are vertical to kind of make it so it will sit flush with the front of the frame. If I peel it out just a little bit, you can kind of see that this hole is a perfect square, just a little bit smaller than the actual exterior frame and a little wider than the body of the fireplace, as you can see right there and right there. Everything else is kind of built around it. So like I mentioned before, it's 5 feet tall by 5 feet wide, and I centered the fireplace in the middle. And then what I did to figure out the depth is looked at the instructions, and it said that it needed a few inches away from the wall. And so I built the back frame, basically a complete square, and then the front frame is the more complex one that the actual fireplace sits in. But you could get away with just 2 squares and then some pieces to connect those 2 squares, and then you just figure out exactly where you want the fireplace to sit within those. I'm gonna do shiplap, which I'll show in a second, but the reason I did this vertical piece in the middle is so the shiplap had something to sit on, so it wasn't flimsy going in and out, kind of flexible in the middle. And then, like I mentioned before, the top will be a cool piece of wood that we find at the lumber yard, and we'll put that on at the very end after everything else is painted and finished. We'll find a cool cap piece. The other thing to mention is I did end up screwing it into our hardwood floor. I'm a little bummed about that, but if we ever take this out, it's just 4 screws in the floor. I'll kind of show that. You can kind of see one here, one over there, and then 2 in the back. That's all the damage that was done to the hardwood floor that I'd have to fix if we took this out. The only other thing that I would have to do is I found the studs behind the wall and screwed this 2x4 in up here to those studs and then mounted it to the top so there's no wiggle room, and if someone climbed up this like a little kid or something like that, it wouldn't fall on top of them. The finished depth here, I ended up going 11 inches and 5/8. That just seemed like it worked for me and it made sense, and I'll be able to cut an 8-foot piece of shiplap 5 feet wide, and then I'll have enough left over for the end pieces to kind of cap those. You could really finish this any way you want to. You could do tile, you could do drywall. It's kind of up to you. We just picked shiplap because it seemed like the easiest thing to do, and it kind of matched the rest of our house. So now that all the framing is taken care of, we're going to shiplap this. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with the front and go all the way up, obviously leaving this cutout. Then I'll do the sides last, kind of capping things off. And then I have little end caps for the corners as well as along the wall to kind of cover up any imperfections. To attach the shiplap, I'm going to use a compressor as well as this 18 gauge brad nailer. You could go down to 16 gauge, but they'll just be a little bit more visible. I really like the 18 gauge, and I'll kind of show you, the finished product and how small the little nail holes are. One option at this stage is if you want to use some adhesive, that wouldn't be a bad idea. I'm not going to worry about it. In my experience, you don't necessarily need it. but that is an option to go ahead and do that. So the first piece, I know that the floor is level. I'm going to make it even with the, level with the floor, and then make sure that it lines up perfectly with the edges. And then I'm just going to go ahead and nail it. And this is the time to kind of calibrate your nail gun if you need a little bit more pressure. So the first piece I'm going to go and do along the bottom. After that, all you need to do is nail in this little groove, and then you'll kind of see how they fit perfectly together, and all the nail holes are completely covered up, which is pretty slick with Shiplap. So now that the first piece is there, it's kind of the foundation for the rest of it going up. I'm going to go ahead and not tape this part because like I said, you could do a different finishing if you wanted to tile or drywall or whatever you want to do on the front and the side. I'm going to go ahead and shiplap this, and we'll come back to wrap the video up. So that is it. You can see I painted it black like I called it at the beginning of this video. We did have a pretty difficult time finding the perfect piece of wood for this top mantle. I ended up having to fabricate something myself. I'll show a close-up of it in a little bit, but I ended up having to find a few pieces that I had to glue together and kind of become this massive piece of wood up here. But overall, I think it turned out pretty well. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, I used 18 gauge nails. And really, there's a few spots that you can see them, but you wouldn't unless you built the thing, and unless you're me, kind of nitpicking and that kind of stuff, you wouldn't be able to see the nail heads at all. Part of that is because I did these trim pieces that kind of finished the edges, and then I used a ton of just caulking to kind of cover up the little sins and imperfections that came up through the process. Let me show you the remote control for this guy, and then I'll kind of do a little video close-up tour of how the finished product came out. So here's the remote control. There's quite a few little buttons here that are kind of cool. So you have power off and on, obviously that, turns it off and on. You also have a few settings for flame. So I don't know if there's too much of a reflection here, but I'll kind of show some different options. So that's low, that's off. That has kind of a blue tint to it, and then we'll get back to the one that's our favorite. That's just kind of the classic roaring fire there. And then there is some crackling noises. I'm not going to go through those. It's kind of up to you if you want to explore those. But there's the heat function, both low and high. Low is nice. I'll be quiet for a second and you can hear how loud it is. It's pretty quiet. So that's on low setting, and I can feel the air, even out here 5 feet away from the unit. And then high really cranks up the heat. I can't remember the wattage. Like I said, the product is in the link below if you want to check it out yourself on Amazon. At the time of this video, this unit was about $350. Totally worth it. All you need is a typical outlet. So here is the final build. You can see that I used some trim pieces for the corners as well as the back that connects it to the wall. The cool thing about this is if I wanted to uninstall it, like you saw earlier in the video, there's 4 screws in the floor that I'd have to patch up, and those wouldn't be too bad, and then a few holes in the drywall with that header board that I installed. but everything else is just a nice seam of caulking, and it makes it really feel like it's always been here, which is really cool. The baseboards down here, I just left behind the whole unit, and I just kind of used the trim piece to kind of wrap around it. But if you didn't know any better, I think you would probably think that it's just completely part of the house. And then, like I was saying before, I made this piece of wood out of some old lumber that we found at a local resource center. I think it was an old tractor trailer, the bed for it. You can kind of see the really cool joints that they connected all the pieces of wood together. I believe it is white oak, and it just turned out super cool. I did do some black epoxy to fill in the imperfections. You can see right there, as well as all the old bolt holes. And it is just packed full of character. The people that have come over so far said their only complaint is that they weren't taller, so they couldn't see the piece of wood more. But overall, I think it turned out pretty well. Here's the fireplace. Sorry about my reflection. You can hear how quiet the space heater that's built in there is. And then one thing else I'll kind of showcase is there are some settings and controls on the unit itself. So if you do misplace the remote control, you can control everything here, and then you can actually turn the whole thing off. So even with the remote, you can't do anything. And then you can adjust some fine-tuned temperature, and then pretty much control everything within this little head unit. All right, so thanks for joining. That's gonna wrap us up for today. Like I said, it was an awesome project to do. I think it turned out beautiful, and I'm super excited to see how my wife decorates this mantle for all of our holidays. It really just took a very cool house to the next level, and it really wasn't that expensive. So a breakdown of the numbers really quick before we go. So this is like $350 for this unit. For all the construction materials, even in the crazy time of wood prices right now in 2022, it was about another $250, including all the shiplap, the paint, and everything like that. And then the mantle piece was a whole different beast, but you could do something less expensive. We found this, like I said, at a really cool resource center here in Colorado, but you could do something as simple as plywood or just a piece of whatever that you can find at the lumber store that you want to finish the way you want to do. So guys, thanks for joining. I really appreciate you guys watching. If you haven't yet, feel free to subscribe to my channel, check out all my other videos. I try to do my best to post at least once a month some kind of new project that I'm working on, whether it's in one of our campers or in our house. Right now, a big project is going on in our basement that I will showcase little bits and pieces of that soon, and we'll see you next time.